Welcome to Rebuilding Godzilla, Episode 6. So today we're rebuilding Godzilla. We are actually going to fully, hopefully, assemble this engine. The head should be on, potentially even the timing belt on, we'll see. And it should pretty much look like an engine by the end of today. That is really exciting because it's been a really long time coming. What we're going to do is we're going to get a bit technical. We're going to dive into what it takes to put this engine together, what the methods are for putting this engine together, and hopefully give you the information in a way that isn't too tedious, but does, if you're interested, maybe teach you something. We'll start with step one at this point, which would be to file the piston rings. So last episode we got the crank in, we showed it all nice and turning, we kind of discussed clearances on that. The next thing to do is to file up your piston rings. So depending on what you do for pistons will determine what you do with piston rings. In this case, I've purchased my pistons from Carrillo down in California, and they just send you this nice little sheet that tells you what to do with your rings, so you don't have to think about it. They claim on a nitrous or turbo or supercharged engine, you run your bore times 5.5 thou. So essentially you take your bore in inches, you multiply it by 5.5 thou, and that gives you your top ring end gap. In this case, that ends up being 18 thousandths of an inch. This here is my top ring, of which you slide in your cylinder like this. And this is ring number one. You got to remember to file your rings per bore. In theory, all these bores are identical. In reality, probably not. So anytime you're measuring end gap, you always want to do what I did here, which is essentially right here. Each pack of rings has which bore it goes into. And then I always keep them in the package. I only ever open one ring pack at a time. Simply keep track of it that way. So this is top ring out of piston pack number one, or ring pack number one. So slide it in like yay. Crush it down into your bore like that. And what you need to do is you need to square this piston ring up. There's a lot of different methods to do that. They sell tools specifically to square that ring up. I've seen guys use a bolt. They just take like a short little bolt and they put it down on the deck with the threads down in the bore, and they run it around to make sure the piston ring's all seated down where it's supposed to be. What I prefer to do is this. This is my number 6 piston with the number 6 top ring on it. This is the brand new piston because I didn't want to have to clean my old wore out ones. And I usually basically just use that upside down to square up this piston ring. Like that. And then in this case, you have to watch out because there's these really deep chamfers on this piston, so only this side is good for squaring. So you actually put it in and then I kind of spin it around and make sure it's square in every possible direction. When you pull it out, piston ring should look a little something like that. And then what you need is a good set of feeler gauges. So in this case, that ring gap should be 18 thousandths. So what we can do is we can find, let's say, our 17 thousandths, which is that guy right there.
Quick question.
Hit me.
So this is a Japanese engine where we're
correct.
dealing with thousandths of an inch.
We sure are.
Has that been a lot of fun translating everything?
We'll get there.
Okay.
We'll get there. An awful lot of math involved in doing some metric to thousandths of an inch conversion. It's not too bad because the piston ring is told to you in thousandths of an inch, and the service manual in fact has everything in both millimeters and inches, so it's not too bad. But one spot where it is bad we'll get to later. So this is our 17 thousandths feeler gauge. As we can see, that slides in there real nice. And then we can move up to our 18 thou. like that. There it is. Just a nice little bit of drag on there, but it goes in. That's our 18 thousandths. So a 19 definitely won't fit. So that ring there is already gapped to 18, and I've already done all the work. I've already filed all the rings, just because it's so tedious. I mean, it's literally put it in, measure it, see how far off you are. So I believe when I put this ring in the first time, it was like 10 thousandths. So I had 8 thousandths of an inch to go, which is nothing, and yet when you're gently filing away with a stone, takes forever. So once you figure out what your in gap is, you come over to your piston ring file right here. What I did is I clamped it to the edge of the desk like so, just so I could turn this. And there's these little posts on this file. And all I did was set it up here, and then one side at a time. I filed this side a little ways, I filed that side a little ways, and then what's really important is you have to break the edge that you file. So when you're filing these rings, you're supposed to file from the outside in. So in this case, I ran the wheel backwards like this because it drags the metal back into the piston. The reason why you do that is if you do have a burr, you'd rather it be on the piston than scraping up and down your bore, gouging shit out of it. So then what you do is you take a file and you very gently just drag it real quickly across every edge just to get rid of any chips that may or may not be there. All 8 edges. You got 4 sides to each end of your ring. And then you stick it back in. Don't want to stick it in with burrs on it. Stick it back in and you remeasure. And now I think I went up from like 10 thou to like 13 thou. So I pulled it back out. You can always take more material off. You can't put it back. So go real slow and approach it and you'll get a feel for it. For instance, for whatever reason on this wheel, this side filed harder and faster than this side, even though the wheels are the same on both sides. I'm not really sure why that was, but that's something I ran into. Top rings were all filed, and then what I actually did is I filed cylinder 1, moved to cylinder 2, moved to cylinder 3. That was very time consuming. And then what we have after you get done with your first ring is your second ring. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this, but if you can get a close-up, little macro shot on this ring, you will actually see that there is a lip on there. See that? This ring's actually upside down just so you can see it, but that's actually an oil scraper. This little lip right here on the edge.
Oh, that lip. Okay, hold on a
See
second.
that? That little scraper lip. So that actually goes up on the cylinder, and that's basically to help swipe oil down the bore. And so from a cross-sectional area, it's a really thin section. It's really easy to snap it and break it. I'm actually really surprised at how brittle these rings are. They don't bend or scratch, they chip. And so if you hit it particularly hard with a file, or you drop it, or you do something like that, they chip. Which this ring, the very, very first thing I did was chip it. And I actually chipped it by the feeler gauge. When I was trying to force a feeler gauge in there I just wasn't thinking. I took a feeler gauge that was really close to fitting, and instead of just gently pushing in, I tried to force it, and I chipped the edge of the ring. And luckily, it was such a tiny chip, and there was so much material that needed to come off of it, I was able to file it out, and it's perfectly fine. And then right here, it's going to tell you exactly what your second ring should be. In this case, 4 thousandths to 8 thousandths larger than my top ring. So I want to run a tight engine, so I shot for 22 thou. 1 or 2 of them is a little over 22. It's kind of a loose 22, but not quite 23. And everything else is about 22 thousandths of an inch. So that's on all of them. And then finally, you have, on these pistons at least, a very interesting oil control ring. And it's a 3-piece ring, so this is kind of weird. These rings are, paper thin. They're just barely even there. And then you have this oil control ring. And so basically, you put one ring on your piston, you put this oil control thing on there, and then you put the other ring on your piston. And these you cannot file. These are unfileable. You cannot adjust them. So what you have to do is install them and measure. And it says minimum 15 thou, do not file. So in this case, each one I put in was larger than 15 thousandths. I didn't measure how large because minimum 15 thousandths is what it says, and it all met that. But if you do get one that is less than 15 thousandths, you're supposed to call the piston manufacturer and let them know, and they will send you a new one. Absolutely no idea anything other than that because all mine fit, so I didn't have to do any of that. But check them because that's a stupid way to screw up an engine by having too tight of an oil control ring. And that's really it. It took me 2 days and a bunch of hours to just really slowly and surely and methodically file away piston rings until they were all set at their gap. And anytime you're filing, I guess the most important thing to watch out for is that your in gaps have to be parallel. So when you file, it's really easy to get these gaps to actually get unsquare, meaning those two ends that are touching there need to be square. And so if you're filing at an angle, you can really fuck it up. So you really want them to be as square as possible. And the only way to do that is just feeling it by hand and just going really nice and slow. That's a piston file from Jegs. I think it was like $40. I was really tempted to buy the super nice ones that are electric and all that good stuff, but I don't know how often I'm going to be doing piston rings. But I think this can definitely get you by, and all in all, saves you probably a lot of money because it's very time consuming. So if you're paying a machine shop to file your rings, I mean, I imagine it'd be quite expensive because I spent hours on it. And like I said, you go too far and there's no taking it back. You have to get new rings from, in this case, Carrillo. But I think they're cheap, so even if you do go too far, all it's going to do is delay you putting your engine together a little bit. And that's basically how you do piston rings. It's not all that complicated. It's just a little bit time consuming. It's very easy to get impatient with it, and very easy to get carried away with the file. So once all those are done, the next thing to do is get ready to assemble your rods and pistons.